I don't know if we'll be able to master them in 20 minutes, but we can do our best. Forward-looking statement, you all know this. Okay, so we are going to talk about the 6 practices. I'm thinking about 10 minutes where I'll go through them, and then about 5 or 10 minutes and we'll do questions. Usually these elicit a strong response. People say, these are fantastic, or they say, these are terrible, and you forgot some, so don't hold back. In terms of the 6 practices we're going to go through, current best practices, talent acquisition, strategy and strategic mindset, architect mindset, timely and predictable delivery, and human-centered. Very quick about me, I am 13X certified architect and strategist. I have been running my own independent Salesforce architect consultancy for 10 years. I've been doing Salesforce for about 10 years and doing CRM systems for about 20. If you want to connect with me, the best place to do it is Twitter, @thisbrianshea. Real quick before we start, show of hands. In terms of your team, how many folks here are a team of 1? Teams of 1. 2 to 4. All right, and 5 plus. And how about consultants? Awesome. Great, so we got a mix. That's fantastic. And big shout out to my teams of 1 out there. I work with a lot of teams of 1, and you're doing God's work. Okay, so when I've given this talk in the past, it's been about an hour. So some of these slides I'm going to go through quick, some of them I'm going to go through a little bit slower. On this slide, I've used this framework with teams before. So when I do assessments for Salesforce organizations, one of the parts is the team, what needs to change on the team. Okay? So generally speaking, when I go through and do this framework, there's 1, maybe 2 of them that's like a gap for them, that's missing. So really the takeaway is, when we go through these 6, think about, okay, is there one of these that I can take back to my organization and work on? So number 1, we talked about current best practices. This is a term that's thrown around a lot, particularly by consultants like me. We like to go in and say like, well, that's not best practice, and it stops everybody in their tracks. When we talk about best practice, the key point that I'd like to drive home with this is, it's not just about your knowledge as an individual, it's about what is the consensus among the smart practitioners out there that do this kind of work. So it's kind of a corny phrase, but I like to say it takes a village to establish and learn best practices. You can't do it on your own. It's something that you as a team need to do, you as an individual need to do, in conjunction with community, in conjunction with how other folks do it. And in terms of kind of skilling up your team to get better at best practices, obviously the ones you'd expect: Trailhead, get certified on relevant topics, obviously be up to date on your release notes when new releases come out. And I'd say probably the biggest one, on the theme of it takes a village, get involved with your Salesforce community and build your network of practitioners, particularly in the space that you work. Like if you're in financial services, meet other financial services Salesforce people. If you're in whatever, the field service space, meet other people that do this. Okay, number 2, resourceful talent acquisition. We all know as people that work on Salesforce that is a big platform and you cannot learn everything about it. I've worked with organizations that try to do it all on their own. It usually doesn't end well. That's why they call me. So you can't do it generally, especially if you have a complex org, just with internal hires, right? Very hard to do that. So I put together a list of kind of different staffing strategies that organizations can use to fill the talent gap. Obviously, we've got the ones that everybody's familiar with: FTEs, full-time employees, or long-term contractors, staff aug type of situation. Generally, folks are familiar with those in their organization. Larger system integrators for bigger projects, right? Smaller consulting firms can play a role, usually at a different price point or a different size of project. Recruiters can be a great source in terms of getting talent. Generally 1 through 5, like everybody who works in this space and who has an org and works at a company, like they're familiar with all 1 through 5. When we get to 6 through 9, people are, usually there's 1 or 2 that they think, oh, we haven't thought of that before. So freelancers or independents can be a really good resource. Different price points with freelancers and independents versus your larger firms. So it's something you want to investigate if you're not leveraging freelancers at this point. Fractional architects, fractional CIOs, that kind of thing. What I like to say with these types of folks is they're like independents or they're like freelancers with a process. So they come in with a strong point of view, they come in with a process. They're usually solo or small firms, but they've got a very clear way that they do their work and they've got a framework. Definitely new Salesforce talent is something that is often underutilized, and there's a bunch of fantastic organizations in the ecosystem that help nurture new Salesforce talent. I've got PepUpTech on there. There are others, but PepUpTech is fantastic in what they do. And the last one is training your existing team members. Some people find this obvious, some people find this a light bulb moment, but if you've got people who are interested in this stuff, give them training so they can learn new things and contribute. Okay. Strategic mindset. Okay. When we talk about strategy, sometimes when people talk about strategy, they make it sound very abstract and very complex and very academic. It can be, but it doesn't need to be. When I talk about strategy, I'm talking about outcomes, defining business outcomes, okay, and really focusing on those, right? So, outcomes. As soon as we use the word Salesforce, as soon as we utter any piece of technology, we're no longer talking about outcomes. We're talking about solutions that potentially drive those outcomes. So, if you say, hey, what outcomes are you looking for? And they say, we want Service Cloud. You say, not an outcome. We got to go back. What is the business need that we're trying to drive here? And there's a gentleman who is a thought leader in this space. His name is Jeff Gothelf, and he defines outcomes as a measurable change in human behavior. Okay, so we want more customers to sit for meetings. We want more customers to sign up. We want customers to do something. We want our internal people to do something. These are outcomes. They're a measurable change in human behavior. Okay, and if you want to learn more about these things, a few great resources. Design thinking is a great one that a lot of people lean on. Opportunity solution trees, which a fantastic consultant called Teresa Torres created, and impact mapping. Goiko Adject is a IT person who came up with this great thing. It's around tying your business outcomes to hypotheses around features that you can deliver and hopefully achieve those outcomes. And last but not least on the strategy thing, this quote is super. How many people have seen this quote before? Oh, fantastic, okay. Oh, good, okay, only 2 people. Sometimes I put it up and everybody kind of gives me the eye roll, like this is like, 1992 called and they want their inspirational quote back. The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. When we're talking about strategy, we're talking about taking things away most often so we can focus on what's most important. Let me pause here real quick. Are there any questions so far?
Hi. I was wondering if you could expand a bit on training existing employees, kind of like L&D, succession planning, and like how you backfill yourself after you get promoted and you take on like wider responsibility and that type of thing.
Yeah, so how to scale up existing employees? Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things that I've found success with is to start small and to start with procedures, particularly when folks aren't familiar with Salesforce. Like if you say, hey, you're new to Salesforce, why don't you set up users? That's a good start. But if you say, hey, you're new to Salesforce, why don't you set up users and here's how we do it here? That's a better start, right? It gives them the steps on how to do it. I know in the past, I've definitely done the former thing where it's like, yeah, just jump in, figure it out. That doesn't work for many people. But try to start small and try to put some procedures in place. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm actually one of the people that we're talking about here. I had a moment with my boss where he asked me if I wanted to become the Salesforce guru, and they actually, yeah, exactly. Everybody says no. Why? I immediately jumped at the question. They actually took me aside and gave me 6 months to lock myself in a room and go through Trailhead. I followed the admin certification trail mix, went through all of that, got my certification, and then was moved on to the newly created Salesforce development team as the service admin. And it came with the commensurate raise in pay and all of the benefits that you can think of that come along with that kind of a jump from tech support supervisor. And it definitely cements loyalty to a company and to a manager that is willing to put that much effort and investment into your company growth and your personal growth. Definitely worth looking at that as an option if you haven't done.
That's a great point. Yeah. I meant about the loyalty, not about the joke from before. It's, when they invest in you, you want to stay and you want to get back. All right, so number 4, I'm going to move on. Number 4, architect mindset. And real quick show of hands, how many folks are familiar or have heard of the well-architected framework? Awesome, fantastic. And I'll assume everyone who didn't raise their hand has not heard of the well-architected framework. Okay. So the well-architected framework is a kind of series of principles, I'll talk about it in a sec, that Salesforce launched last year about how to build well-architected systems. So a few points here. Number 1, architect mindset is not just for architects, it's for everyone. Admins, anyone who's working on Salesforce should have a knowledge and understanding of how to build systems that are trusted, that are scalable, that are easy to use, the kind of core architect concepts. It is everybody's responsibility. At the same time, when you're working on a large project or you're working on a complex org, it's really important to actually have an architect that is an architect that can do that kind of work. There's a couple of anti-patterns here that I want to call out. When we see people who are like, we see companies that are like, oh, no, we've got an architect on this. And what we see is they've got a Salesforce professional who's not an architect. So when you need an architect, that doesn't work. And also, they've got an architect who's not a Salesforce professional. Generalist architect who doesn't have like the core Salesforce skills. These are a couple sort of patterns you want to avoid. And also, I'm not going to go into it here, but there are many types of architects: certified technical architects, enterprise architects, integration, solution, data architects, etc., etc., etc. Make sure you choose the right one. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was curious. Bringing on board an architect when your org is like 7+ years old.
That's the best time to do it.
When your org is a mess and not obviously building it from scratch is the ideal, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, it's like the old saying, like the best time would be 7 years ago. The next best time would be today.
Yeah.
The other saying is when you're in a hole, stop digging. So it's been. When you realize you have a problem, it's a good time to call for help. So I would say a couple things about architecture. Sometimes folks can kind of get intimidated with architecture, or there's misconceptions that it's like just all technical, et cetera, et cetera. I will say this, and this is a hill. I don't know if I die on this hill, but pretty close. Architecture is much about communicating the business value of architecture as it is about the actual architecture itself, right? We practitioners in this space, when I use a term like technical debt, or I use a term like best practices, these are good terms, we know what these mean as practitioners. Your business stakeholders probably don't. If your justification for something is technical debt, start again. It doesn't speak to them. How can we make technical debt as tangible as possible for our CEO, for our business stakeholders? And I mentioned the well-architected framework. Definitely read up on it. There are 3 pillars: trusted, easy, and adaptable. And there's a lot of good stuff in there, general principles around architecture. Number 5, timely and predictable delivery. We talked about strategy, we talked about architecture. These things are fantastic, but if you're not delivering, you will have frustrated stakeholders. We have a fantastic representative from GearSet here. GearSet is one of the fantastic tools. There are others. There's also tools now built into Salesforce to do this kind of work. But one thing, and I know Jack and all the folks at GearSet and all the other great DevOps practitioners would say, is DevOps first and foremost is about process and communication. Tools are important, but the process and communication comes first. So DevOps, for folks that are getting into it or new to it or want to learn more about it, there is a ton of potential value there for your organization. And if you want to learn more about it, there's a certification out there about it. There are Trailhead resources that you can check out. Also understand that if you do an assessment of your org's delivery process and you decide that it needs significant changes and upgrades, understand that that's probably going to be a project, much like your projects that you do. Requirements, design, implementation. It's not like weekend work or something you do on the side. Number 6, human-centered. This is the last one. So human-centered, when I've done this in the past, when I originally did this framework, I did not have human-centered. There was only 1 through 5, but I posted this on Twitter, got great responses, and then there was a couple folks, Adam Doty from the design team at Salesforce and Jennifer Rhea, I think that's how you pronounce her name, who said, you forgot about human-centered, that needs to be number 6. And they are right. I sort of collapsed human-centered kind of into architecture, I think. And what I realized is there's overlap, but human-centered NIST brings its own set of tools and design thinking and frameworks that are fantastic, and they call on very different sort of set of disciplines than technical architecture does. So if you are looking to learn more about human-centeredness and design thinking, you should definitely check out Salesforce Strategy Design Cert. There's a number of great trails on this topic. I will also, I've gone fast through this, but there's a lot of resources in here, links and things that if you're interested in digging more into any of these, I can give you a QR code after. You can download this deck, and then if you want to read more, you can click on the links and check it out. Those are the 6. Are there any questions?
I want to hear the tale of the 2 people. I saw the slide. Of the 2 people, and I want to know.
Give me that.
Okay, very quickly, since there's no other questions, I'll talk about it real quick. Okay, so one of the fantastic things about strategy design in those tools is for us folks that are like traditional like IT engineering folks, we think in terms of process. Process. What are the steps? What are the steps in the process? It's all about process. Process is important. At the same time, real humans in the real world don't think about the steps in their process, right? And the example that I use to kind of drive this home is we've got 2 salespeople. They get the same job description. They do the same job. But they've had vastly different experiences in their careers. One of them is extremely comfortable with technology, loves it, loves new things, is excited. When a new technology comes around, they're like, sweet, this is going to be an opportunity for me to do cool things. The other one hates technology, has had bad experiences with it. These 2 users have the same process. They will have vastly different reactions to your what you do, and they will approach the tool completely differently. If you approach this purely through process, you miss all that subtle game. So design thinking talks about the process aspect, but also the emotional and social perspectives that are involved with it. So if you are interested in this, if your eyes are lighting up, and I can see most people's are not, but there are some that are. So if this is something that interests you, check it out. There's a lot of really, really good stuff here. It's the idea that we're not just automatons that are going through life following processes, but we bring different things to our jobs. Sound good? Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of the conference.